Welcome back to another episode of the Politic Pod podcast. Today's episode is the final of 3 episodes, which are shorter and will take place while I'm out of the country. So it is the third and final pre-record episode before we talk about more current affairs issue. And actually, on that matter, before I forget, the next episode after this, we will officially know who our next Prime Minister will be. Will it be Liz Truss, as many people believe it will be, and it seems set on, or will Rishi Sunak make an astonishing late comeback? I guess we'll have to find out. And while you're listening to this, you'll have a better picture of the situation than we presently do. But today's episode is about Britain's big issues. And so what I have done, I've gone on YouGov and I've looked at the major issues according to the British public, the main 5, and then we've both ranked them and we're going to discuss them for a little bit each. But first, it's a quiz. So I talked about YouGov there. The question for you, Nasif, today is which senior Conservative politician co-founded YouGov?
Senior at this current moment in time?
Yes, at this current moment in time, very senior.
Ooh, and they founded YouGov, right? I feel like, can I hint at Dominic Raab?
No, he's even more senior than him.
Even senior? Oh goodness. Right, Boris Johnson.
No, not as senior as him.
Oh wow, okay. Liz Truss.
No, even more senior than her.
Even more, goodness, right. All right, well, she's currently Foreign Secretary, so what could be far more? Rishi Sunak.
Very close.
Ooh, all right, I'll have
One more
one last
guess.
guess. I'm absolutely terrible at this, but I'm gonna take a hint at Ben Wallace.
No, it's not Ben Wallace. It is when you say Rishi Sunak, you're right. Since he was the Chancellor, it is the present Chancellor, Nadeem Sahari.
Oh right, I didn't know that. Okay.
No, there's your fun fact for the day, everyone listening. So you're probably
Indeed.
wondering, what are these 5 big issues in the country? So the 5 biggest issues in the country, according to the British public, are health, immigration, the economy, the environment, and Brexit. So before this episode, I sent these 5 issues in a list to Nasif and told him to rank them. And he replied, as he normally does, in Roman numerals, very traditional. And his list was 5th, immigration, 4th, Brexit, 5th, Brexit, 4th, immigration, 3rd, the environment, 2nd, health, and 1st, the economy. And this is very similar to mine. I put, the only difference is I put immigration last, I put Brexit 4th, I put the environment 3rd, I put health 2nd, and I put the economy 1st. So our top 3 are all the same. But let's start off with our difference. I put Brexit 4th and I put immigration 5th. You added the other way round. Why is that?
When I was ordering these, I was thinking, okay, well, let's start at the top. I generally, as most people do, start with that which is the most important, and so I kept going down the list. I said, okay, I think economy is the most important, then health, then environment, and then I came to immigration and Brexit. And at first I thought, okay, well, these are relatively similar issues. I mean, Brexit plus immigration, they usually went hand in hand when I used to hear them on the news. But I eventually sort of tried to separate them out and think, okay, which is less important? So I went with that strategy. And I concluded that Brexit, at this current moment in time, is less important. The reason why I put Brexit 5th is we have already left the EU. The vote for Brexit was 8 years ago. A lot has changed.
6 years ago, but still.
Oh, sorry, no. Yes, 6 years ago.
Still a long time.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you for the correction. But Nonetheless, a lot has changed since then. I think there are many people in Britain who have European sentiment, and that's understandable. When Brexit happened, I was actually a Remainer, um, but I think at this point we kind of have to accept we've left, and we now have to move into a different direction. I don't think there's any possibility that we could perhaps remotely even want to return to the European Union now that we've left. And I think we ought to turn our focus elsewhere. For example, the Commonwealth. That's an example that's generally brought up quite often. So I put Brexit fifth, as it's not really relevant anymore. Uh, we don't really see it on the news anymore. Our relations with the EU have more or less stabilized. We've more or less dealt with all the treaties and the policies regarding the European Union. I think ultimately now it's just a matter of sort of diplomatic ties. How are we going to respond to the actions of the EU, and how are we going to get on with them? And I would, in spite of the fact that we've left, I would encourage good relations with the European Union, and I would encourage just generally strong diplomatic relations, considering that the EU also consists of many sort of Western liberal democracies. So, you know, I put it as fifth, as it really shouldn't be the main focus of government anymore, and far less than immigration, which I think is a lot closer to home and a lot more to do with our domestic policy, which is the reason as to why we left the EU in the first place.
Mm. The reason I swapped around a bit, I feel as though so I'll try and explain my points of view. So, Brexit, you're right in saying that the huge bulk of stuff is done. A few years ago, Brexit by far was the most important issue. But we got a deal. We got out of the EU. We got a free trade agreement with them. There's a lot to be said about strengthening ties with the EU in whatever way that may be. I think that's something that we should definitely consider. There is a Northern Ireland Protocol bill, which has become quite a bit of a controversial topic between us and Brussels. They're not too fond of it. We, are trying to push it through. Ultimately, at the end of that, I feel as though like Northern Ireland unity within the UK is extremely important. I believe that should come first when we decide foreign policy. But that's another topic for another time. But the thing with Brexit, there's it's going to be debate whether it's the right or wrong decision for decades to come, and we're just going to have to wait and see how that pans out. But the main thing I think with Brexit is that we need to take those opportunities. We've got Brexit done. Now we need to deliver on Brexit. Regardless of what your opinion is, it cannot be denied that there are both pros and cons of this move. And those opportunities that have been offered to us, we must take them. And we must look at all types of things we can do, trying whether that be cutting regulation, which could unleash billions of pounds into the UK economy, or whatever it may be. It's something that's quite important still. And I'd imagine it'll be a big topic, as will any of these, for the next general election. But the reason I've put it above immigration is because the government has introduced more immigration tailored policies in recent years, a bit like the new, I forgot what the white paper with the legal immigration. Of course, there's debate about that, but in terms of illegal immigration, with the Rwanda policy, of course, that's hugely controversial. Some ardent supporters of it, and then some that just think it's despicable, really. And that's another topic where you sit on the fence for that one. But I feel as though immigration, presently at the moment, the government's kind of been more realistic. Like 10 years ago, the government was saying, okay, these are the targets, we're going to reduce immigration to this level. Now they've just scrapped targets because they know it's hard to handle. They're more about making pragmatic decisions to reduce the numbers. But I also think the government know, with our aging population, that we do need quite a big influx of legal immigration. I know that angers lots of people in this country, but we really, at the end of the day, do need more people in this nation because the working age will stay the same, but the average age of the population is ever increasing, and it's why retirement age is going to be bumped from 65 to 68, at least collecting your state pension, it's because of our aging population, and legal immigration is a solution to that. Birth rates are dropping, as are death rates in this country, and they've been low for over a century. So we do need to respond to that in the best way we can, and legal immigration is a way to do that. But it's still a big topic, but I simply believe that Brexit is more important in the present time, at the present time. So those are those two issues. Let's go back to the top, and we've both put the economy first. Why did you put the economy first?
Well, I think it's a simple thing, really. From the economy comes everything. You know, without when we don't deal with the economy properly, money runs out, and that's about it's about as simple as that. I mean, I'm not very well educated into more detailed economics, I must admit, but from seeing the cost of living crisis at this current moment, as well as the ongoing housing crisis and even the education crisis, where we have plenty of qualified students, but not many occupations left, and thus competition has been driven up once more, and it's gone to a point where there have been cases of even PhDs who are struggling in this country. And the way to deal with that, regardless of what solutions there might be, regardless of how we do it, it's all to do with economics. Ultimately, without the economy, or without taking much notice towards the economy, we don't have the money. And this is something I've said when I've looked into sort of communism. Actually, there's a joke that someone once told me, which is that when you study Soviet economics, you realize there isn't much economics because there isn't much of an economy going around. But I put economy first because from that comes the funds to deal with health issues, to deal with policies regarding the environment, to deal with even funds to put up with immigration and maybe even Brexit. All the others that we have on this list of ours stem from the economy. The economy is money. And if we don't deal with it properly, we just don't have money. As I say, I don't want to be reductionist, but it's about as simple as that. We must put the economy first. And I know that there are plenty of sacrifices to be made, and there are people who are struggling, and yes, there are many at this current moment there are many strikes going on, particularly rail strikes at this moment. But I think really, as a country, we need to band together. We need to sort of stop goofing around. So does the government, and come to terms with the fact that our economy needs a real shake-up. We need to change policies, and we need to sort of be able to tax sensibly, and spend sensibly. And quite frankly, I'm afraid the government has, at least in my view, has not been doing that for the last decade.
Mm. And what is a great way to tell, likewise, I've put the economy first, is that whenever the economy is an issue in the country, as it presently is with the cost of living crisis and slowing growth, that by far becomes the number one dominant issue among the British public. When, for example, health becomes an issue like it currently is, it's not necessarily at the top of people's priorities. So that's a great way to tell. And as you said, everything's based around the economy within this country, even at a government level. Without the treasury, none of the other departments would be able to function, because money is what makes the world go round at the end of the day. And whoever, Liz Truss or Rishi Sunak, really needs to get a grip of the economy to tackle inflation and encourage growth. And there are many different policies that people have proposed to do exactly that. But we're just going to have to wait and see. And all we can be is optimistic about our economy within the country. It is quite sad, in my opinion, that just sort of around 2019, when May handed over to Boris, the economy was starting up again. Interest rates were low, and we're really seeing proper growth like we hadn't seen in quite a while. And then, just like that, the pandemic hit, and that has caused such a massive devastating effect. and much of the economic policy of the government hasn't been able to take place because of the need for furlough schemes and everything else related with lockdown. So that's the economy. We've both agreed that's first. Now let's talk a little bit about health. So we've both put health second. Why is that for you?
I think, I think health is a relatively broad thing. So let's sort of put a sort of few boundaries on it. When I say health, I'm referring to um, two things mainly, although there are other things, but two things mainly. That is to say, the NHS, our national healthcare system, which I believe has served us incredibly well and is a system that, regardless of one's political opinion, most Brits can agree is something we will never give up. And the second thing, when I say, when I talk about health, I'm referring to the general well being of the country. Um, so I put health second um, for those particular, for those two reasons. The first is the NHS. Now, this is a pretty common and relatively obvious argument. The NHS is a system of healthcare where if you are injured or if you need any sort of medical assistance or help or if you need to go to the hospital basically for any needs whatsoever, you can go. You can go book an appointment, or you can, if you're really desperate, you can go into the hospital and you can seek treatment, and it is free at the point of use. Now, that phrase there is usually emphasized because when we say at the point of use, what that means is that we actually have to pay for the NHS through our taxes. Now, this is a common argument against the existence of the national healthcare system that actually, oh, we must pay taxes to the government to fund the NHS. But personally, I don't think that's a problem. See, the issue is, and I've mentioned this before, which is that when we don't pay taxes to services that could be paid for by the government, we have to pay for those services with our own hand. And that ends up actually being more expensive for the average individual. For example, in America, they have relatively low tax rates, but that's only because whilst they have low tax rates, they have to individually per person, Americans have to pay a whole load more privately to pay for services. What could otherwise be, um, saving a lot of money by paying taxes towards the government. There's this misconception that the higher taxes go, the more families struggle. And generally, yes, but somewhat no. There's a balancing point because there's a point at which if you pay enough tax to the government, actually, we can save money paying taxes rather than paying directly through our own private and direct payment to services like healthcare. So I am a firm supporter of the NHS, and I think it's a brilliant idea. And with the foundation of the NHS in 1948, health, everything in health has been going up, and we've been doing very well in terms of all sorts of diseases and illnesses. There used to be a time before the 40s when the average person could catch a cold and unfortunately die from it, whereas now with the NHS, we're doing very well. So that's the first thing. The second thing is regarding the general well-being of the country. Now, this is a lot harder to pinpoint, but I think we all know that Britain does have a lot of health problems. A lot of things we sort of may have inherited from the United States, things like sort of obesity and as well as the prevalence of high sugar amongst many children. And this is as a result of fast food and unhealthy foods and unhealthy diets. So what the government did, and I remember this distinctly when I was in primary school, is that you might remember, Ben, there was a sort of food pie chart. On one side was carbohydrates, on the
I,
other was fruit and vegetable. Yeah, and at the
yeah.
bottom, very small section was fats, so to speak. And I think, when the government changed that to a far more complex one, as a primary school student, I was like, no, they made it more complicated. But now that I'm older and I look back, I think that's a very good move, because we have had an obesity problem in this country, and it affects productivity in industries, and it generally just affects people in terms of health. And we don't want that. As a country, we want to stay generally healthy, because that's what allows us to live longer. It's what allows us to, you know, basically be more prosperous as a country. And this is the roadblock I found, where the government has made these moves, and I think that's all well and good. But I think there hasn't been much emphasis on that part. I think we still have huge problems with obesity. We still have huge problems with, you know, fast food and diets, and I don't think the government has acted a lot, because there are still people in this country who will eat fast food all the time, especially young children. I remember learning that actually in this country, on kids' channels, you're not allowed to show advertisements of sugary foods and drinks. But whilst that's a good move, there still seems to be a massive prevalence of sugary foods and drinks in our stores, and chocolates. And look, I love chocolates and I love fizzy drinks and whatnot. But I think there's a lack of discipline, especially amongst the youth, who are generally more affected. And because the youth generally can eat a lot more, when they get older, they start feeling the effects of unhealthy diets. For example, there's a general myth that fat is bad for you. Well, that depends on what type of fat, unsaturated or saturated fats. And moreover, generally, it turns out that a great cause of sort of an increase in weight and an increase in fat composition in the body is actually carbohydrates, carbs, and starch, and sugars generally. And it's really mainly sugar. It's why also orange juice, in recent times, people have called on to the fact that orange juice isn't actually a healthy alternative to fizzy drinks. It's just as sugary. And what's even worse is orange juice is just the juice of fruits, but without the fibers, without the roughage, so to speak. So, I think these things really need to be spoken about, and they are. But I think we haven't, at least from what I have observed, we haven't seen really the government pushing in the last 5 years to push Britain to a healthier diet. And I think people, I mean, fruits, vegetables, and a small amount of dairy and a small amount of good fats and cholesterol. I think these things make up a good diet. And I'm not a dietitian, but I believe really that we as a nation are missing out on a healthy diet, and the government needs to push for this. I think really that, combined with the fact that we need to put more funding towards the NHS, is what will ultimately allow our national healthcare system be under less strain. A lot of people to this day go to the hospital simply because of problems caused by an unhealthy diet. And the national healthcare system doesn't need that. The national healthcare system with injuries and far more serious things. And unfortunately, whilst of course unhealthy diets are very serious, there are easy ways to avoid this. And the government needs to realize this. A healthy diet for the people means a healthy dealing for the NHS, and it means that the NHS is under less strain and is viable for more funding, I think.
You bring up some very, very interesting points, and it's a great way of looking at it, both the health of the nation and the health of the NHS itself, which, as we know, is struggling. I do think in terms of obesity, like the government, of course, they've put up lots of public health programs recently. And there is, as you said, a big, many people are pushing for more government involvement. But I think also alongside that, there should be like I don't want to be too laissez-faire, but it is down to like a personal choice at the end of the day. I mean, the government can definitely encourage people more, you could argue, but each individual can take their own decisions with their diet. And, happily, there are lots of people that do that look at themselves in the mirror and think, this is not what I want to look like. And they make changes for the better in their lives. And that's something that's very respectful. And also on the NHS, because there's been a big push for more funding, especially from the government themselves, to be honest, who want more hospitals. They want to shorten A&E waiting times that are ever increasing, and shortened operation patient lists, which are getting increasingly longer. But the problem is the funding levels in NHS are higher than they've ever been. I'm pretty confident of that. But still, the problem's getting worse. So while funding and more funding is more important, there needs to be probably a more methodical way of investing that money rather than just chucking it and hoping that it works. There needs to be some sort of task force across the country, something that, even if it's quite expensive, I think it could be worth it at the end of the day, thinking, how do we address these problems? How is the best way? Look at different healthcare systems around the world. Okay, so the final topic, and if we just briefly touch over this, is the environment. Of course, we discussed it a few weeks ago when it was a boiling heat wave, in some places upwards of 40 degrees Celsius, which is simply astonishing. But we were discussing before the show that while we've put the environment third, which is an average position on our list, many people will undoubtedly put it first, think that's the number one priority issue. The thing with the climate, it's more of a long-term problem. Of course, we've seen some problems recently in this country. I'm not going to deny that. But something that will get worse over time is where the cost of living crisis, for example, will have more detrimental effects to the British people in the shorter term because it's more damaging in a shorter period of time. And we were both discussing, we're not climate deniers. We're not going to go Alex Jones on this show and act like it doesn't exist. But at the same token, we believe there are more important issues at the present moment. But of course, we don't deny that it's very serious and it's something that we need to stand by and try and reach those net zero targets by 2050. So I think we both agree on that, don't we?
Yes, yes. I mean, I would elaborate, but I think what you said there is certainly correct. I think it is a more long-standing issue and perhaps requires more international cooperation as well as just domestic.
Yeah, and of course we had COP26 only last year. Actually, around the time of this episode going up, it'll be about a year since that event, and I imagine there'll be more different climate agreements. And it's an international thing. We all need to work together. The causes are global, the impacts are global, and the response must also be global. And every single country in the world, especially the big countries that emit the most carbon, need to commit to this if we are to avoid climate change having big effects, quite disastrous effects on our world, on planet Earth. So that's the end of the episode. This one, as again, is the final of 3 episodes, which are a bit shorter. And now it's time for On This Day in Politics. And this one, it's kind of a stretch, and it's in politics because there honestly wasn't a lot to talk about. But I've went with, in 1998, Google was founded, which of course is the biggest search engine in the world. It's connected people to many different voices, opinions, articles, and of course has informed politics massively. And actually, a few years ago, if you can remember, the Google CEO went in front of Congress in America, and there was criticism of Google searches engines, putting forward more different articles. They may be from Fox News, higher up on the list, or it could be from CNN, of course, who sit on different sides of the political spectrum. So that is all for today's episode. Please remember to follow us on all of our platforms, including subscribing to the podcast. Also check us out on YouTube. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts. And as we said, next week, we will know who the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom will be. Will it be Liz Truss? Will it be Rishi Sunak? Find out next time. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.